Every morning, the girl wakes up and tests if her mother is still breathing with her finger. Only after confirming that her mother is alive does she put on her school bag, fix her hair, and head out to school alone. However, as soon as she steps outside, her tears can no longer be held back and pour out uncontrollably. This was the highest-grossing film of 2010, and you would never expect that in the theaters on its opening night. The tissues were sold out because everyone was crying their hearts out. Some people couldn't continue watching halfway through, so overwhelming was the emotion. But despite the heartbreak, this was a film that no one should miss, a movie hailed as one of South Korea's for greatest tearjerkers. Soo-ya believed her mother was incompetent. Every day, her mother was busy with work and often forgot to pick her up from school. Even meals were only provided at her uncle's house. Adding to that, Soo-ya had lost her father at a young age, so she had grown increasingly isolated and withdrawn. But recently, Soo-ya began to suspect her mother might be going mad. One day, when she casually mentioned that she didn't want to go to school, her usually stern mother not only didn't get angry but took her out for a big meal. When she asked for a game console, her mother immediately bought one to play with her. When she complained about the TV being too small, her typically frugal mother bought a big screen television on the spot. Even more unexpectedly, her mother, who never cooked, stayed up all night to make Soo-ya's favorite sushi. Though the result was a disaster, her mother didn't give up, trying once more just to take her daughter on a picnic in the countryside. Despite a sudden downpour the next day, Ha-young drove hundreds of miles to a seaside area where it wasn't raining to give her daughter a unique picnic experience. One day, after school, when Soo-ya returned home, she heard her mother vomiting in the bathroom. Worried, she asked if her mother was sick. At first, Ha-young was stunned but quickly denied it. Yet, at that moment, her heart ached painfully because she carried a secret she could never reveal. During a family gathering, Ha-young suddenly felt dizzy, her vision blurred, and she collapsed. When she regained consciousness, she found herself in the hospital. It was at this moment that her brother learned Soo-ya's mother was in the advanced stages of stomach cancer. Ha-young had kept this secret locked away in her heart, even though it weighed on her every day. On the way back home, consumed by sorrow, Ha-young spoke in a heavy tone, "I'm sorry, brother. I've always troubled you." Her brother could no longer control his pain and pulled the car over to the side of the road. The sudden, devastating news feeling like a sharp knife thrust deep into his chest. One day, Ha-young received a call from the school. It turned out that Soo-ya's classmate had drunk her milk. And because Soo-ya had an obsessive-compulsive disorder, she poured the milk into the classmate's lunch. This act led to her only friendship being severed. When Ha-young found out that her daughter had no friends at school, she felt guilty. She had been so focused on working that she neglected spending time with and teaching her daughter. So, she tried to teach Soo-ya the importance of sharing food and playing with classmates. But Soo-ya stubbornly insisted on playing alone, worried that this behavior would negatively affect her daughter's development. Ha-young continued to persuade her, but Soo-ya remained resolute, saying she could be just fine on her own. Hearing this, Ha-young's heart was pierced with pain. She held back her tears and explained, "You'll become very lonely." But Soo-ya challenged her, saying, "You've never been with me. I've always gone home alone, done my homework alone, and it didn't matter if you were there or not." Ha-young retreated to her room, her sorrow overwhelming her, like a flood that couldn't be stopped. Tears fell from her eyes like beads of a broken necklace, each drop laden with deep guilt. She regretted not having been with her daughter more and was devastated by the thought that she would never have another chance to be there for her. When she composed herself and came out of her room, Soo-ya, now understanding, immediately apologized to her mother. Ha-young pulled her into a tight embrace, her heart set on making up for the time lost. On Soo-ya's birthday, mother and daughter held a special celebration. They blew out the candles, set off colorful fireworks, and sang a cheerful birthday song together. Ha-young knew that this might be her last birthday with her daughter, so she did everything she could to make it unforgettable. She bought Soo-ya a bicycle and eagerly encouraged her to practice right away. Ha-young stayed behind, trying to help her balance. But Soo-ya complained that the bike was too big and that she couldn't reach the ground. "We'll try again next year," she said. But Soo-ya didn't know that her mother had no next year. Ha-young, holding back her tears, gently encouraged her daughter to try again. "Don't worry, I'm right behind you," she said. Her words were like a soft breeze to Suya's heart. Suya tried again, riding the bike with her mother silently supporting her from behind. But as Suya slowly gained confidence in riding, Ha-young grew weaker. Her illness had worsened and she eventually collapsed on the ground. When Suya looked back, she saw her mother in pain and her heart filled with worry and fear. At home, Ha-young hurried to her room to take some medicine. But because her esophagus had been damaged by the disease, even a small pill felt like a boulder to swallow. She tried to stifle the pain, making no sound, but it didn't escape Suya's sharp eyes. The next day, as she walked home alone from school, Suya suspected her mother was seriously ill. To confirm her suspicions, she asked her aunt about it on the way home. Her aunt tried to brush it off, but Suya sensed her hesitation and avoidance. She looked her aunt directly in the eyes and asked, "Is mom going to die soon? Don't lie to me, or I'll hate you for the rest of my life." Seeing her aunt's helpless expression, Suya seemed to already know the truth. She even begged her aunt to keep it a secret and not tell her mother that she knew. The next day, Suya gently pushed open the bedroom door, only to hear her mother's vomiting sounds coming from the bathroom. She chose not to expose this secret and instead remained silent. Trying to stay calm, she called out, "Mom, I'm going to school now." As Suya closed the door, her tears fell silently like pearls breaking off a string. At that moment, she wished she could immediately return to her mother's side and give her a warm hug. But she knew that doing so would only make her mother more upset. By the time school finished, the sky suddenly opened up with a torrential downpour. Her aunt, who never liked carrying an umbrella, stood alone at the school gate. This time, she no longer complained that her mother hadn't come to pick her up. Instead, she prepared to walk home in the rain. But at that moment, her mother suddenly appeared. From that day on, Suya became particularly considerate and clingy. Even when her mother was busy working overtime, Suya would silently stay by her side, offering her endless companionship. She even came up with an interesting idea to marry her mother. So, Suya put on a suit while her mother wore a wedding dress. The two of them danced together, hand in hand. Though this suggestion was childish and absurd, it revealed Suya's deep attachment and love for her mother. One day, Ha-young sent her daughter to school, but Suya suddenly said she didn't want to go to school that day. She just wanted to stay and spend time with her mother. Ha-young hesitated for a moment but agreed. They relaxed on the couch, enjoying a rare moment of leisure. As Suya slept, she had a dream in which she and her mother were playing by the seaside. But when she turned around, her mother was gone. She anxiously called out her name, only to wake up from the dream. Instinctively, she reached out to check her mother's breathing, and when she felt her steady breath, she finally relaxed. Meanwhile, Ha-young was quietly preparing a gift for her daughter. Knowing that she wouldn't be able to attend her daughter's wedding, she decided to sew a beautiful wedding dress for her in advance. As night fell, Ha-young sat quietly at the table, opening the photo album filled with memories of herself and her daughter. Each photo captured their laughter and warmth, the beautiful moments seeming as if they happened just yesterday. But knowing that her life was coming to an end, unable to accompany her daughter through more of life's journey, tears welled up in her eyes. Her tears were not only of sorrow for her daughter, but also of regret for not being able to continue being by her side. At dinner, when her nephew placed the spoon in Suya's bowl, her daughter, who had a cleanliness obsession, suddenly got angry and refused to eat. The atmosphere became awkward, and Ha-young, seeing this, pulled her daughter to the room and scolded her, asking her to change this habit, saying no one could put up with it. But Suya, unable to suppress her long-hidden feelings, said, "Mom, you're the only one who can accept me like this." She didn't want a video game console or to learn to ride a bike early. What she wanted was for her mother to live a long life and stay by her side as she grew up. The two could no longer hold back their tears and embraced each other. At that moment, Ha-young realized that her daughter had known about her terminal illness for a long time. But in order not to worry her, Suya had been pretending not to know. The cruel fate, like a storm in the night, suddenly swept over them. That dark night, Ha-young's condition suddenly worsened dramatically. The pain tore at her like a wild beast, keeping her tossing and turning, unable to sleep. In agony, she asked Suya to sing a song for her. Suya softly hummed the song, but when she turned to look, she found her mother unconscious. Although Ha-young was revived after urgent care, her cancer had spread severely, and her eyesight was also greatly affected. Soo-ya silently thought back to her mother's words about hoping she would have her own friends. So she made a decisive change and bravely reached out to her lost friends, apologizing sincerely and seeking reconciliation. After her friends forgave her, they were able to rekindle their friendship. Soo-ya then brought her classmates to the hospital to visit her mother, happily introducing them to her. Ha-young was pleased to see her daughter's growth and smiled with contentment. That night, Soo-ya stayed by her mother's bedside listening to the radio. Even though she was very sleepy, she kept her eyes open, saying she would sleep after hearing the broadcast, because she had secretly prepared a gift for her mother. However, soon she fell into a deep sleep. Then, the radio suddenly broadcast the letter Soo-ya had written to her mother. "Mom, are you sick? Mom, I wish I were the one sick. Mom, from now on, I'll cook for you and take care of the housework. You only need to accompany me as I grow up. Mom, you're the person I love the most." Upon hearing her daughter's letter, Ha-young hugged her tightly, as though trying to pour all her love and warmth into her daughter's heart. This motherly love was deep and intense, like the warm spring sun that could melt the coldest ice in the world. Her tears flowed like a burst dam, filled with love and sorrow at having to let go. The next morning, Soo-ya slowly opened her eyes and called out, "Mom." But there was no response. She asked again, "Are you asleep?" Still no response. Soo-ya stayed silent, gently covering her mother with the blanket before walking slowly to the flowers to water them. Seeing that her mother still didn't respond, Soo-ya held back her tears and said, "Just sleep a little longer." Then, she walked out of the room and stood quietly outside the door, waiting. At that moment, the doctors came to do their rounds. Soo-ya tried to stop them from entering, not wanting to hear any announcement from the doctors. She knew that if they entered, it meant she would never have her mother again. But when the doctors forcibly opened the door, Soo-ya could no longer hold back her cries. She begged the doctors not to take her mother away. This time, Soo-ya truly lost her mother forever. 6 months later, one rainy day after school, Soo-ya walked home alone. Just like her classmates who had their umbrellas, she thought of her mother again, remembering how she had often forgotten to bring an umbrella before. Now, she had learned to take care of herself. 20 years later, Soo-ya finally wore the wedding dress her mother had sewn for her with her own hands. This was a symbol of her mother's love. We cannot predict or control the length of our lives, but we can cherish every moment of it, cherishing family, love, and friendship. These emotions are like brilliant stars, lighting our paths through life, making us embrace, treasure, and give with all our hearts, ensuring that no beauty slips through our fingers and that no regrets remain in our future.